We're going up and down, over and over, over and over. It's the same old thing. Up and down, over and under.
Well, cool. Gilad, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you on.
Good to be on, man. What's going on?
Not much. We're just catching up a little bit about the snowstorm. So I'm looking at about 6 inches where we are, but I heard the Northeast up in your neck of the woods got absolutely hammered.
Yeah, I mean, you got to put the Boston curve on it though, because we're used to getting that amount up here. But about 2 feet, I think maybe 26 inches out here. But within a day, it's all good to go.
Perfect. Well, so like I was doing a little bit of research, and I was excited to see that HyperIce was named by Fast Company as one of the most innovative companies of 2021. And you just so happen to be the Chief Innovation Officer of HyperIce. So I guess first, congratulations. But one thing that I really want to get your perspective on is, in your eyes, what does it mean to be innovative?
It's a great question. We spend a lot of time at the company talking about that, and different people have different thoughts on the matter. My theory has always been innovation should be what's coming next and how do you get to it first. And from that perspective, the challenge that we see a lot is we have some ideas, and I think companies in general have the ideas, but sometimes the technology doesn't quite match up to it in terms of what's available. You look at the computer industry and how there's certain tech that's out there and it hasn't quite caught up to, what's applicable yet. So a lot of what we spend our time doing is what's available now, what will be coming down the pike that we can anticipate from a tech perspective, and what are the things that we need to actually build ourselves to have for our products that we need to literally innovate and create that hasn't been done before.
Yeah. So, to dig a little bit deeper, you're in a very interesting field because you have access to athletes, like real-time demand, real-time feedback, and I imagine probably pretty vocal feedback at times. To what extent does that weigh into the direction that your company takes some of these new product lines or iterations? Is that just one piece of the puzzle? And are you looking at like internal R&D, cutting edge research being done by the academic community? Like, how are you kind of weighing all these different inputs?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it probably makes sense to go just back a little bit into the story. HyperIce was founded about 10 years ago by Anthony Katz. And the company that I originally came from, NormaTec, I started our sports medicine division there, was acquired by HyperIce just about 2 years ago. Anthony and I had been friends for a while in the industry and kind of seeing the same stuff. He'd go into a training room and see my shit, and I'd go in the training room and see his shit. And, we just started to collaborate and kind of, ideate on certain opportunities. But when both of us got started, and I'll take it back a little bit to my history with NormaTec.
Please.
It really was this concept of, I had this product that was working on patients with poor circulation. My late mom was our founder. She was an MD, PhD, actually not too far from you, at Cooper Hospital, just over the bridge in Camden, New Jersey. She was chief of rehab there for a long time. And she started seeing patients with poor circulation, and she wanted to create a better mousetrap to move the fluid in the body to kind of reduce a limb. A lot of times you have something called lymphedema, which is after breast cancer surgery or injury, and it's a big swollen limb. And she theorized, and what we ended up realizing is that there was a way to really enhance blood flow and fluid movement in the body more effectively by mimicking what the body does externally. So with the NormaTec boots, pulsing and holding and releasing in a very strategic way, an algorithm that we developed and has been very effective to really mobilize that fluid. So I took it, and I remember the day I was like, Mom, there's got to be an application in sports. I wrote a little bit in college. It was club, but for me, it was high level. And she said, kiddo, this isn't my jam. Sink or swim. Here are 2 machines and $5,000. Good luck. So the long and short of it really was that I needed to go somewhere. And I said, let's start at the top. So the top of the pyramid, like you just said, Ken, is really the pro athlete world. What are they doing? They can afford anything, right? They can spend as much time as they want on anything. So they're really going to do whatever they feel is really most advantageous. And we went in with the NormaTec product right around the time that Anthony was doing his thing with HyperIce. and got it on the best. And what was interesting is at first, the NormaTec was originally used as a rehab tool. So something happened, you sprained your ankle, you got a ACL repair, you're rehabbing from something, there's a problem, and you're using it as what they call a
some sort of injury.
Yeah, to really kind of rehab that. And when the light bulb went off for us, it was University of Florida. They had back-to-back basketball championships in the mid 2000s, and they said, we need a bunch more units. And I was like, well, you already have 2. You got like 14, 15 guys on a roster. How many ankle sprains do you have? I'm like, no, we're using it for what we now call fresh legs faster. And the whole concept where if you get that blood flow moving, things are going to get better and you're going to get legs back underneath you. And that kind of started our evolution down the road of kind of recovery. Before recovery was really a thing, you go back far enough, recovery kind of meant drug and alcohol. And then for athlete recovery, you're recovering from an injury, and now recovery as a means of performance is this kind of new concept that I'm excited to get into with you. But as we kind of push forward, there was really working with the pros, working with the best of the best. And at first, they all wanted to keep it as their secret weapon because they didn't want to tell anybody about it.
Oh, I bet.
Part of it was they were used to seeing it in the training room, and they didn't want the bad juju that maybe coach thought I was injured. This is, before we realized, and everyone else was utilizing it for kind of performance recovery. And then from there, it kind of migrated over to, I just don't want my competition to know about it because this is, my secret sauce.
Yeah. So, and I guess this was early years for NormaTec, correct? Did any of these universities approach you and want to actually invest and try and, you know what I mean? I don't know. Because I imagine like there's the great Gatorade story, right? And just coincidentally, it's University of Florida. Did you ever get any of those sorts of requests from universities?
Actually, great Gatorade story. You mentioned University of Florida. First time I go down there, I get introduced, and I'm blanking on his name. But he was one of the original sports scientists involved with the Gatorade formulation. I guess it was back in the 60s or 70s. Whenever
right.
So he was telling me the story. He was the director emeritus of athletic director or something like that at University of Florida. This is back in like 2007. And he's telling me the story of kind of how everything got started. And I said, well, do you have any regrets or, talk to me about the process? Like, I'm so fascinated. And he said, well, the one regret that I have is, before when we were making the batches, we had to create a big enough vessel to be able to mix everything. And we used bathtubs. And back then, the citric acid that we were using was so intense that it would literally eat away at the enamel and it would eat through the bathtubs. And that's why back in the day, well, Gatorade wasn't always in, can form. And before plastic bottles, it was in glass bottles because it would eat away at a can until they changed the formulation, right? So imagine what that was doing to your insides back in the day. Now it's obviously different. But he said, I wish I kept those, eating through bathtubs. That would have been cool.
Oh,
kind of like the waffle makers for Bowerman and Nike.
Absolutely. And now, you could just turn it into an NFT and you could sell it online. You could do all sorts of shit with it. That's incredible. Okay. So sorry, not to cut you off. So NormaTec, so that's interesting. So it was actually the people using the product who identified that there's a real recovery opportunity here, not just like a rehabilitation opportunity.
Yeah, it's one of those great moments where you kind of let the product go out there and you wait for the consumer and the athletes and the sports teams to kind of tell you how it's being used and what they're doing. And it's fascinating and something that we spend a lot of time on. You focus on the engineering, you focus on the product dev, you focus on the marketing, but it's kind of great in a bubble. You got to get it out there and you got to let everyone start to interact with it. And a lot of times we'll come out with new product and as we're getting ready for the launch, we'll kind of get it out there and we'll go to an Ironman event, right? We'll go to whatever protein and we'll just sit back and we'll just wait and kind of look and see how are they interacting with it. Are they turning it on the way that we thought? Are they using the settings the way that we originally thought? There's so much information that you get. Now, on the flip side of that, sometimes the pro world, because we are dealing with the best in the world, so Olympic athletes and NBA, NFL, NHL, really we've been able to penetrate just about every sport, which is tremendous. And I think a testament to how well the product really works. Not everything that a pro athlete does is applicable to somebody walking into a Best Buy who wants to feel good after, playing rough touch football on a Sunday with their kids.
Right.
So being able to kind of figure out how do we give the masses, both the pros and the in shape elites and the wannabe elites and everyone else, down to the person who's just trying to live the best life. And those are, the real masses is people who just want to age gracefully and move the best that you can. We're really a movement company. If we can make you move easier and longer and feel better while you're doing it, we've succeeded really in our goal. It's not always applicable, but the human body is the human body, no matter how you look at it. And a lot of those principles kind of carry over.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that's been kind of really apparent, specifically with HyperIce and NormaTec, but I think more broadly, and that's kind of why I'm excited to do this podcast, is that knowledge gap, or that barrier that used to exist between what, let's say an elite high-end performer like an NFL athlete has access to, and to your point, someone who walking around just a working professional but wants to move better, age gracefully, they now have access to the same sort of like technology and resources. And I just think that's so fascinating, because I can even remember, so I played college football. It was not that way even at that time. And we're talking 2006 to 2010, right? Like, it was starting and the internet had been a huge, tremendous help. But it felt like, if you got a bad injury and your training staff couldn't handle it, like, you had to go to some specialist who had some level of information that wasn't widely available. You had to go to like a guru, practically like a recovery shaman. But I feel like with HyperIce, right, and what you've done with NormaTec, it's breaking down a lot of those barriers and giving people access to a lot of this stuff. And this isn't like a plug for HyperIce, by the way. I'm not trying to sell HyperIce. I'm doing it right now. But like what I'm always impressed by is it seems very affordable as well. Like, this is something that the average person can get their hands on and use on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we look at it from a couple different perspectives. One is, I guess, taking your point and working backwards. From a price perspective, when technology first typically comes on the market, it's very expensive. It's available to a very select few people. A great way to think about that is car cell phones that were like $3,000 back in 1980, whatever. And now everyone has, a cell phone you can buy at 7-Eleven if you wanted to. So how do we democratize, if you will, recovery? Because like you said, it wasn't originally designed for every individual that's on the planet. It really was for the best of the best. Because that's where the motivation was. That's where I call it the double M, the means and the motivation. That's, those individuals that have as much money as they want to spend and have as much time to focus on their bodies, because that's what's allowing them to succeed in their profession. But if you kind of go back a little bit, and you were saying how, you went to college and played football there and the stuff that was available to you, part of it is the technology. Part of it is just the industry kind of coming into its own. Us understanding more as a world, right, from a scientific perspective of what the body needs. It's no longer just, throw some ice at it. Back in the day, you'd watch Randy Johnson, he'd throw, 8 innings or whatever it is, and he's a post-game press conference, and he's got his Mariners jacket up here, and he's got a big ice pack, and it's like, that's what every kid did. I need an ice pack because that's what Randy Johnson did.
I'll tell you, so I don't know if you know, I'm from the Seattle area, so
did not know that.
You're speaking my language right now, and
that legitimately was just a random. I was just a big Randy Johnson fan.
You're defining my childhood. Watching Randy Johnson.
But that's we always wanted to do, be like Mike, and we didn't really know what Mike was doing. And even back in the day, these athletes weren't doing. Maybe it was cold plunge. Maybe they would take a day off. It was very passive from a recovery perspective. Again, if you weren't injured, you were kind of just allowing your body to try to heal. You try to get some sleep and everything else. And the technology has kind of come in along with the science. And in some cases, in the case of HyperIce, for example, the technology has kind of maybe come a little bit before the science. And a great example of that is our Hypervolt line that uses the percussion, right? So we came out with that in 2018. And before that, there were a couple of guys messing around with some jigsaws to, add percussion. Or this company, I believe, was out of Nevada. It was like a small mom and pop. The guy would make in his basement called DMS, right? D muscle stimulator, and it was like a $3,000 bulky kind of whatever it is. And so, people knew. You were rocking DMS.
So not to interject, and I'm glad you said that. So this would have been God, 2007. And I was training with actually Marv Marinovich and Gavin McMillan out at the Sports Science Lab. I don't know if you know those guys. They do a lot with like high level NBA guys. But this is back then. And it must have been one of these DMS machines. I mean, I'm pretty sure made of metal. And it looked like a piston just coming out of this thing. Like there was no soft rubber end, but that was kind of like the first iteration of what I saw. And we tried to bring one back to school, and they were like, the hell is this bullshit? Basically,
somebody, what is this saying? Why would you need it? What is it, and why do you need it? And that is the crux of it. Is that again, it's the technology and the understanding of the science and what's going on with the body. So you go back to the New York Times, 2008 headline: Scientists discover a new organ in the body. Like, it's crazy, right? We've known our bodies for millennia at this point, and we've been dissecting people at least for the last 150, 200 years very successfully to know what's going on in the body.
Right.
And what they discovered is how you define an organ. You could define the interstitium, which is really the network, the web of material and fluid pockets between the muscles. And all this the connective tissue, right? And it's one of the largest organs in the body because it's everywhere. It's connecting everything, right? So you have your muscles, but it's all this stuff, and the lymph is flowing through there, the lymphatic system and pockets. And it's one of the reasons why we're so supple as young people. A 10-year-old is typically not getting an ACL injury, but as you get older and things aren't gliding as much and we're not as hydrated, not just how much we, obviously drink from a water bottle during the day, but also just our bodies in general, we move that stuff around. So the idea of percussion and compression and some of the other things that HyperIce has really focused on with our technology line is being able to take the body and create, in a way, body hygiene. And that's where a lot of this is going to be going. And what we see this going, everyone, whether it's Sonicare, a regular toothbrush, you're using floss, you're using mouthwash, you're taking care of your dental structures very appropriately, at least, hopefully people you're hanging out with are. And it's the same thing. We have skincare routines and everything else. What are we doing for our bodies, our muscles on a regular basis for body hygiene? So whether it's using Hypervolt for 5 to 10 minutes a day, and you can rock it in your car a lot of the times for your quads and you should see our Zoom calls. It's everyone just, using Hypervolt or in Normatek. It's pretty fun.
That's awesome.
Fun company to work for.
I bet.
But all of this kind of technology moving towards kind of the science and where everything is going. And that's always been for me and for us, two sides of the mountain. You have the science over here and you have real world application, immediate feedback over here. I'm sure you've experienced that or have athletes around you have experienced that back in college. There was stuff that there wasn't really any scientific evidence for, but there was some dude who would be in his underwear upside down doing a headstand in the middle of winter eating peanut butter and pickles because he thought it helped him recover. And a little bit is that superstition, but some of it is just because people feel that it's improving something and they want to kind of stick with it. So where you actually have science and real world application meet is kind of that pinnacle. And that's a lot of what we're spending our time on. And these are the products that we're coming out with, is both scientifically based as well as it feels really good and it actually does stuff. Yeah.
Well, and to that point, so I've gotten to use like the Hyperbolt, and I love the NormaTec. I don't have any. I'm gonna lobby really hard after this, by the way, to get some for my wife. But they're amazing, and I've even used it in an extreme situation. So I've talked about this before on the show. I used to do this decathlon back when it happened in New York City, Wall Street Decathlon. D10. Awesome event, like great people, great cause. But it's one of the more taxing things I've ever done in my life, right? Because you back to back, you're doing all these events. You're running a 400, you're doing pull-ups, you're doing a 500 meter. You are absolutely dead. And they had a NormaTec booth set up. And I was like, oh God, man, I'm dying. I got to do something. Let me run over and see what this is all about. And even in such a short period of time, I didn't get a full 45 minutes. I maybe got 20, 25 in the boots just after absolutely getting crushed. I mean, physically walking out of there felt so much lighter and just kind of felt like, I imagine a lot of it was probably like lactic acid buildup and all. I mean, just, it's like it all had been flushed. And it's, it just such a substantial increase immediately in my performance in that moment that I was like, wow. I was like, okay, I got to get through today, but after this, I got to figure out what's going on over here with NormaTec because this stuff is amazing.
So
go ahead.
We love that. It's a great soundbite. That's what we live for. Whether it's a D10, whether it's a actual Olympic level decathlon with USA Track and Field, and at the Olympic level, we obviously have the Winter Olympics that are coming up pretty soon,
right?
And everything else. Or you're not just using it during actual performances, but you're using it during training sessions, because that's great, right? For a performance session, especially, but it's to some degree a little bit rare in the sense that not everyone's doing decathlon. You'll do a Ironman, you'll do a marathon, you'll do a 5K, or whatever your sport is, play a game of basketball. But you're training, right?
Yeah.
2-3 times a day as a professional athlete, one really, hard 5 days a week. If you're kind of more of a normal person just trying to get after it, what can you do in between those to make the best kind of strides and improvement, so that not only are you ready to go hard the next time, but you're also reducing the rate of injury? Because if you are feeling fatigued and you're not putting your all into it, and you might misstep, or you might not be able to get your leg up quite high enough on a rep, or whatever it is, that's where you start introducing more injuries. That's why you see more injuries typically, towards the ends of games, because people are kind of fatigued and their bodies are feeling it more, and it's just a different state than when they first start off.
Yeah.
So we love that soundbite, and it's immediate. And that's one of the great things. There's other technologies that are out there that there is science on paper, but you don't really feel too much, and you're just like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? And am I going to stick with that? And we love that intersection of the science is there along with the real world application. And like you said, you get in, you feel it. You don't have to wait 3 hours. It's, within 15, 20 minutes, you're feeling something happening, and you pop out and you're better than when you started.
Yeah. Well, so this is something I wanted to ask you about today. As I get older, and I've got 3 little kids, like longevity, health span, quality of life, everything you said, movement, these are all things that are very much like top of mind for me. And I'm kind of re-architecting the way I approach things, even like working out, when looking at things through that lens. So what I would love to understand, and knowing that you founded NormaTec, can you talk a little bit about what's happening in the body when someone is using those NormaTec boots, and why kind of like that compression and circulation is, to your point, not just valuable maybe in the moment and recovering from a hard workout, but some of these potential quality of life benefits that you can see by using something like that on a more consistent basis?
Yeah, it's a great question, great point, and it really comes down to fluid dynamics in the body, right? So we have this matrix within our muscle groups and surrounding our muscles of the interstitium, and anything we can do to open up those layers and create better pathways for the fluid to move is very beneficial. So when you rock a hypervolt, for example, into tissue, and you're actually using that percussive technique, right, to go back and forth at whatever the RPMs are, something ridiculous. You do slow-mo cameras, it's amazing, like what's actually happening. But what it's actually doing is, as it's percussing, it's actually allowing those layers to kind of expand. And then when you jump in the NormaTec boots, that mechanism that we patented and that's employed while you're in the boots, it's flushing out all of the byproducts of activity, the lactic acid, all the stuff that you want to get out. You want to get the bad stuff out. You want to get the good stuff in, right? We basically just want a quick oil change for the body, so to speak. So by opening up those layers of tissue and by moving that stuff out, you're really going to give yourself really the best shot at getting back to where you need to be. Yeah.
And so this is obviously something the body does naturally as well. Is it just that NormaTec, and to your point, like the percussive therapy, it just like helps your body do that more efficiently, faster, more effectively? I don't mean to put a bunch of words in your mouth.
No, it's great. Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is we're employing on the NormaTec side a lot of natural physiological mechanisms. So the pulsing action mimics the calf muscle. So you're out there and you're running on the field of the D10 decathlon, or you're running the bus, same principle. Your calf muscle is acting like a heart down below, moving you forward, but also pumping the blood flow kind of back up north. So that pulsing action made a lot of sense. We employed that. That's one of the things you feel with the NormaTec. And then we have these great one-way valves in our body that prevent the fluid from coming down. So we did a similar thing. We're rolling below where you're actually pulsing and moving kind of like the toothpaste in the tube, kind of in the right direction. So a lot of that is all natural based. We're just kind of allowing the body to speed up what it's normally going to do. Because you work out and you're completely, flat out, completely maxed, and then you're in bed for 10 days, right? And you're sleeping and you're eating and you're drinking, but you're not moving. You're going to get up, you're going to be groggy, but you're going to be feeling fine. It's going to happen. It's just going to take a long time. We need to speed that up. We need to give the athlete the power in his or her hands to really take, control over their destiny and do even more so. I mean, we see that across the board in life where I remember back in the day, one of our director of manufacturing, this is years ago, I was chatting with him and we were going back and forth with a vendor over email and drawings and this and that. This is some of the early days of NormaTec. And I said, Peter, how did you do this back in the day before email? Like, did you carrier pigeon? He's like, no, we would send faxes or FedEx. I'm like, how long did this take? So we've sped things up. You're nothing unless you're on your phone and you're emailing and you're dealing with a kid over here and you're watching TV and you're cooking. Like, you got to do all these things. Same kind of thing where we need to just do the most that we can, that we possibly can on a day-to-day basis to make ourselves feel as good as possible. And what's great is that you don't just have to, think back to what people used to do that had time and money. Well, you get a massage, right? Yep. A lot of those principles kind of carry over into the NormaTec and HyperIce line products in terms of moving fluid and kind of getting after the fascia and the muscles and allowing things to kind of move in the right fashion. But not everyone has the time and the money. Massages are great. I love massages when I can get them, usually pre-COVID times. But everything else is really just about how do we allow people to access this technology in the easiest way possible so that it can make the best impact and benefit on their day-to-day. Yeah.
Do you, I'm sure you do, but I'd be interested to hear, do you have any interesting data points around just how much consistent use of some of these recovery protocols that you guys enable can actually, I guess first, I'm always interested in the realm of sport, improve athletic performance or reduce injury. But I'd be interested to hear, are you guys also contributing some studies around aging and longevity? Is that going to be another focus for the company?
Yeah, aging, longevity, really aging the way that you want to age, right? Because the idea that, you're a retiree and you just kind of have to hang it up and, you can't really play with the grandkids the way you want to, whatever it is. We're going to be living longer and longer as science and medicine allows us to have better medicines and identify illness and issues kind of earlier on. But really from what's going on, there's no, I could throw out a percentage. I'd probably be bullshitting you. You're like, hey, 33% better recovery. It's so arbitrary because there's so many variables that go into it. What was your activity? What was your level beforehand? Are we talking about a guy like LeBron James? Or are we talking about a guy like me, playing pickup at Equinox on a Saturday? Where are we with this? One of the interesting studies that we did at the U.S. Olympic Committee was actually, and this is another question, which is how do you actually measure recovery? What are you actually measuring with recovery? And I remember back in the day, I got a secret pass somehow to the Nike secret lab up in Oregon. And I went down and literally they made me sign my life away that I wouldn't talk about what was in there. And I was talking with one of their top sports scientists back in the day. And I said, well, what is the gold standard? And he's like, well, it's not to make people feel less pain. I don't care if you feel more pain as long as you're performing better. So in the end, it's about performance. Right? Because we recover in order to be able to perform. And that could be in an NBA game, or that could be rolling around the floor with your kids. But whatever it is, we want to maximize that opportunity. So this Olympic Committee study that we had done was looking at something called a pressure pain threshold test, where it used a device called an algometer, which looks like a kind of a cell phone with a rubber tip at the bottom. And you press it into the muscle. So it could be quads or hamstrings, calf, and it's measuring downward force. And you have the participant or the athlete in this case kind of indicate pressure, pain. Boom, and you mark it and you have a note, right? Downward force meter. And you take that 3 times, you take the average, and you can do that. The idea, right, is if you're recovered and you take your thumb and you jam it in your quad, you're gonna be like, all right, that's weird, but I'm cool. But if you work out really hard and you jam in your quad the next day, you're gonna be like, oh, that delayed onset muscle soreness is real. The struggle is real. That hurts. So the idea is from a pain to pressure threshold perspective, we can kind of look at that stuff. And it was one of the earlier studies. We also did some studies on flexibility. You look at thermography, and there's lots of things that are out there. So I could come up with a percentage, but there's so many variables, and also different body parts have different feedback and different. I mean, there's so much there. What I can tell you is that both from a scientific perspective as well as real world, again, the pros can use anything they want. And the fact that they're all choosing HyperIce, the fact that they're all choosing NormaTec from a compression and a percussion, our thermal lines, our vibrating foam rollers, everything else, they don't owe us anything, right? I mean, a lot of them are investors, so they see where this is going and they want to get on board. But they can use anything they want. They're using the stuff that will legally enhance their performance to the best of their ability, and they just keep coming back to the stuff because it really works.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I've used, I believe it's the Hyperbolt. What's incredible is like when you use some of these percussive, I hope I'm using the right terminology for you, but like the percussive therapies, is that what you get? Thanks, man.
Yeah.
What was really eye-opening to me, and like my kids love it, my wife loves it, like it's the increased range of motion that you're just like, whoa, I didn't even realize how locked up I was, right? Maybe because I haven't gotten a massage in 2 years, or because I've just been training a certain way and not paying attention to flexibility. It's kind of like what you were saying with the boots. It's that ability to almost get like instant relief and like instant positive feedback. And it's, it kind of just makes you think, it's like, wow, okay. How does that play out over time as to I'm trying to age gracefully. It's like, I want to be able to move the way I want to move. I want to be active into my older years. This whole show is not about longevity, but clearly it's top of mind for me right now. But that's why I'm so interested in some of the stuff that you guys are building, because it seems to have such an impact and such a tangible impact. Whereas a lot of these things that you can do for your health and wellness, you're kind of taking a little bit of a leap of faith, or you're hoping that it shows up 3-6 months, a year down the road. It's pretty cool to have access to something like this where it's like, whoa, there was a change that just happened.
Yeah, I think that concept of body hygiene comes back into play here, where you're not just going to brush your teeth once and that's going to be it, right? Yeah. That'd be a bad day. But you're doing these things, and in health, we don't want to just do things when we need to. You don't want to just brush your teeth once you have a cavity. You want to do these things to give yourself the best chance to not have cavities, to have fresh breath, to feel really good, to have good dental structures. Same thing with the body, right? What are those things that we can do to kind of go through our day to feel really good? That's not only going to help our performance day to day, whatever that is. It could be sitting on 5 hours of Zoom calls without getting up to go to the bathroom like most of us are doing these days. And, pushing that, or the performance. And as you continue to navigate through life, really that longevity and aging, it's not just about how long you live, it's how well you live during that length of time, right? Which
I think is a big perspective shift that's important. Yeah.
In the end, it's about being as happy for as long as you possibly can. And for everyone that I've ever met, you talk to my wife's grandparents, they're in their 90s, they're still around, they're doing great. And if there's ever a health, incident, Leon, the grandfather, loves to tell me, Gilad, it's, you have health, you have everything, right? Yeah. And if you're moving well, you have everything. It's when you have a problem, I'm sure you had injuries and moments where you're not moving as effectively as you want to be, and it completely shifts your entire mindset into what's possible and how do you frame your day to day. So whether you're performing, and we love talking about performance, we're talking about pros and all that good stuff because it's sexy and it's fun and it's intriguing of what they're doing and how do we unlock the secrets of the best in the world. But in the end, it's about just whatever you're doing, whatever's in front of you, how do you do that to the best of your ability and feel good while you're doing it? Yeah.
Well, and to that end, I've got a question for you. So with HyperIce now, you guys, I guess products or, recovery technologies, modalities, however you want to refer to them, you guys offer now a fairly wide array of offerings, right? So for someone who maybe listens to this and they're like, hey, look, I like the idea of feeling better, moving better. Could you kind of quickly run through how should someone go about making a decision as to like what might be the best fit for them? And so maybe to even make this question more focused, it's like, look, you've got the Hyperbolt, like the percussive therapy, right? We talked a little bit about like body hygiene. You've got some of these like hot, cold contrast treatments. You've got the NormaTec boots. You know, I guess, how do you see, and maybe you don't see it this way, but like, how do all of these different means of recovery kind of work in unison?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and something we spend a lot of time on, because we, you know, obviously we understand that not everyone is buying every single product in the lineup. Just like, you know, as a diehard Apple user, I'm not buying every single product in the lineup. So, you know, if you want to look at kind of the Mac, if you will, as the NormaTec boots, if you want to look at your iPhone as the HyperVolt, if you want to look at these other things, you know, anchor yourself from a percussive therapy perspective. You could look at it a couple different ways. One, what's going to give you the most bang for your buck? And two, really how you're coming after it. What do you have going on? So someone who's young and healthy and doesn't have anything, and they're just feeling good, they may, which is a lot of people, but also not most of us, they may not need the HyperIce X, which is the hot, cold, immediate hot, cold, just crazy marvel of technology that you literally... Making something hot is easy, right? In the sense that it's been done before. Heated socks, heated steering wheel, heated seats, heated blankets. It's out there. And we have a great Venom line for that, and how you apply that. Making something cold is really freaking challenging. You usually need like refrigerant. Yeah.
I was trying to read up on this because I was like, where's the ice? Where's like the water technology? So I'm glad we're going this way, because I was trying to figure out how the heck you guys are doing this. It sounds like it's like pretty instantaneous, the back and forth.
Well, the crew that came up with this, they did a wonderful job. They were actually college soccer players, and they would go through injury and they would get on the bus, and you know, they would have the ice water machine on their knee, and they're like, okay, I get the benefits of it. And we can talk about the merits of ice baths exclusively without the contrast component, but this concept of hot and cold alternating and everything else is great. And a hot plunge, you know, come on the road with them typically, and you're not dropping down into your, you know, swim trunks and jumping in or whatever it is. So how can we take that hot is easy in the sense these clothes that get hot and life is good. Cold is really tough. You need a refrigerant, right? You need to stick something in a freezer for a while. You need ice. You need ice water. So it's this really awesome technology, Peltier technology. It's actually been around for a while, but harnessed in a very unique way. That when you run electricity through these tiles, if you will, that are embedded throughout the HyperIce X, one side gets hot, one side gets cold, and if you alternate the direction of the current, it actually flips the polarity of the hot and cold, and you're actually able to harness that in a way to get hot and cold in the different areas the way that you want. And it gets pretty freaking cold. I mean, it's like, wow, I can, like, you know, cool my beer on this. And it really is such a cool technology where everyone has felt, okay, heat start, okay, that feels good. But instant cold is like, not from a freezer, is crazy. Then to go back to your point, it's pretty hot, wild. Cold, it's totally wild. Totally wild.
Because I was looking to, it's not even plugged into anything, right? It's like you charge it up, if I read it correctly, and then it's like, it's battery powered. And I was like, how in the hell are they doing this?
It's wireless, instantaneous cold with no mold and mildew and water and ice pack needs and everything else. And it's fantastic. So it feels great, but not everyone, for example, needs that. It feels really good and people want it, but if you don't have a knee injury, if you don't have something where you want to focus attention on that and you're feeling good, you may not, maybe, let's say, necessarily need that. Again, there's a lot of people like that. Most of us have something, right? I can only imagine after years of playing football, and I'm guessing you played in high school too. Usually people don't just walk on unless you were some kind of like punter in Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
That was rough. Yeah, playing rugby. I'm sure you've gotten taken out more times than you like to recount.
Absolutely.
We all have something there. And then, you know, my typical routine is I have my HyperVolt, and we have a couple different ones depending on what's happening. We have, you know, different sizes and power depending on who you are and what you're trying to get done. But we're HyperVolting on a regular basis. I got my NormaTec boots that I'm in, you know, a handful of times a week, depending on what's going on, especially after heavy loads or, you know, a ski day or, you know, whatever it is. And I really love our Venom. which is our heat modality. And we have a knee, a back, and a shoulder. I love the lower back one that goes on while you're actually in the NormaTec boots. It feels really good. I'm less of a foam roller person. I just am. I'm just not as big a foam roller person as some other people. Maybe I should be. I like to stretch. When you're in and using our Viper technology, which is vibration, we also have our hyperspheres, which is kind of like a vibrating softball, if you will, and we have a smaller one, like a tennis ball. That's really good. Like I'll every once in a while, if I'm jumping rope and I just go a little too hard too soon, I might pop something in my calf, right? And you're feeling that knot, and I'll just use that to kind of like work it out. But it really is kind of all about what you're feeling and kind of who you are. And the biggest thing is to figure out how you can incorporate this stuff, because you can have all this great equipment available, but if you don't have the time and you can't configure your routine, and we spend a lot of time on that too, how can we have something that's quiet enough that you can actually use when you're on a phone call for work or while you're watching TV, you know, and your Netflix and chill, so you can kind of get after it that way. So a lot of thinking goes into that for sure.
Yeah. Well, and there's another brand to be named. I had their original gun, but like I had to stop using it because I couldn't use it in front of the TV with the kids. And whatever. I think they've made some changes as well. But like,
keep the guns away from the kids, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's Wild West out here. But exactly what you said, right? Like, I think that's a perfect example. I had a technology that was really interesting, and probably, things have advanced. I'm sure it maybe got me 80% of the way there to what, current technology can do. But it was prohibitive in the sense that like, it didn't make sense to use it within the course of my daily life because it was too loud. My kids couldn't hear bubble guppies. Like, it just didn't work out. So that makes sense. But you said something about the hyper, and again, like I know you're not a thermoregulation researcher, but I am interested, like why is that contrast of hot and cold so important, and kind of like what's happening there that's, beneficial to someone either trying to recover? It sounds like that's more injury specific versus just general, like you said, body hygiene recovery. Like what's kind of the process that's creating?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that we talk about a lot because either there's not real good education on it or misconceptions around this. So again, it goes back to fluid dynamics. And while you may not be injured, right, so you're not rehabbing a knee injury, you didn't tweak your ankle or something like that, where obviously that makes sense in those cases when you talk about why. You are micro-injuring yourself when you work out, right? You're tearing your muscle fibers, and the idea is that once you recover, they build back stronger and bigger, and off you go. So there is kind of at the micro level injuries that are happening. We got to get your body back to where you need to be. What's going on when you do contrast is when you introduce cold to your body, right? We all love that term shrinkage, right? It happens. It's because the blood vessels are constricted. And it's not allowing. I gotta throw this in somewhere throughout the.
I was gonna say, cue George Costanza.
That's right. It was cold. But it's on Netflix, and I'm systematically going through from season 1 on, and it's just such a national treasure.
Perfect. Absolutely.
But when you introduce cold, you're vasoconstricting, which is the blood vessels tightening up, and that's good on the one hand. If you immediately injure yourself, you want to put ice, let's say, on an ankle or a knee when you go down, because you're going to slow the metabolism to that area. But as soon as that's done, you want to get the good stuff in, the bad stuff out. So then they say, well, take cold and jump into hot. When you use hot, you vasodilate. You're opening up those blood vessels, right? You have better blood flow. So by kind of alternating those, by closing the blood flow and then opening it up, and closing the blood flow and opening up. And notice what I'm doing with my hands here, kind of opening and closing. It's also mimicking what the NormaTec does, the pulsing action. Right? Opening and closing. So by doing that, it's allowing your body to flush out all the bad stuff out and the good stuff in, and allowing the body to kind of hypercharge, if you will, the fluid movement in the body. So that's where it kind of comes into play. And the question is it applicable to everyone? Do you have time? Do you have the ability, to jump into contrast baths and everything else? And some people swear by it. Some people hate the cold. Some people love it. Some people don't know why they like it, and they're doing it anyway. So being able to kind of, again, infuse technology into your daily routine is a big thing. Because, again, you have the best thing in the world, but if you don't use it, it's not doing anyone any good.
Yeah. Yeah. I just kind of had this thought. What's interesting to me about a lot of the like recovery protocols and offerings that you guys specialize in, a lot of it is just helping your body do what it already is meant to do, but like more effectively. As an example, it's like this, you said like fluid dynamics and the ability to help like your body circulate just more efficiently. It's like your body's going to come in and clean all this up. It's like these tools are just a means to like let that happen more efficiently. And maybe that's completely obvious to people. Everyone's like, yeah, no shit, Ken. Like we get that. But it's just interesting to me. It's like, just like I said, just enabling your body to do what it's meant to do faster, quicker, more effectively, I guess. Does that sound right?
Well, and I think that last term you just used, more effectively, is also kind of hitting the nail on the head, because it's not only doing what your body's meant to do, that your body would normally do, would just take more time. So it's not just we're speeding up, but we're actually enhancing. Like you said,
okay.
Use it on your shoulder, and all of a sudden I got my range of motion.
Yeah.
Right. If you just sat there all day, maybe you're not worked from that perspective, from a shoulder perspective, but you're not going to have that necessary, range of motion. So maybe it's getting the body back to its absolute peak possible performance level.
Yep.
And
I love it.
That's something, that is really intriguing and exciting for, I guess, most people who want to go through their day and feel good about it.
No, I think so. Well, this has been awesome and really insightful. So I think maybe it's just one last question to end on here, because I know we got to get you going. What's kind of next? What's coming down the pike for HyperIce that you're excited about? Is there anything that your team's doing? Is there anything going on broader in the space that kind of has people excited about new possibilities?
Yeah, it's a great question. A question I get a lot. Obviously, we mum's the word from all the stuff that we have going on. But suffice it to say, we don't rest on our laurels, and we do not say, okay, we got a good product and we're good. We're constantly evolving and, I'll use the bad cliche term, innovating, right? That we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Of what's out there and what's coming down the pike. For us, it's continuing to push the envelope of what is out there that can actually get the job done even better and faster. And along with the education piece, and as the industry starts to look at it, again, recovery is something that people are now paying attention to. It's not just for the pro athletes. How can we bring that technology down in price? You talked about the DMS. We talked about that earlier. That was around, $3,500, $4,000, whatever it was back in the day. Raptor, which was the original Hypervolt, at HyperIce, was around $3,300, $3,500, something like that. It was big and industrial and got the job done. It was a lot of power, but it was support and it was huge. And bringing that price point down, again, democratizing it to make it available and accessible to more people is really exciting for us. And as I think people start cluing in, I mean, the idea that I couldn't get sports medicine companies back in the day to create a recovery section in their sports medicine catalog, right? That's a catalog that's geared toward pro and collegiate and in some cases high school, like top performers. But Best Buy has a whole recovery section now where you can go in and get all the HyperIce products. And that's a Best Buy in Ohio, like just random spots, because people are recognizing that there is this focus and attention and technology that's available to help themselves, move and feel better.
It's funny now. It's kind of like looking back and being like athleisure. Like who cares about yoga pants? You know what I mean? And now it's like, you can't go to the grocery store without seeing 20 pairs of them. Not that I'm looking, but it's just like hard to remember a time when recovery wasn't important now. I feel like it's almost so pervasive. It's funny to think back to, and when was NormaTec started? So was this like 2000s?
We started, so NormaTec started in the early O's, again, for medical populations. And I started branching out the sports medicine division, starting that about 2007, 2008 is when we got going.
Unbelievable.
And Hyper has been around for about 10 years now. So, it really was riding that wave of getting in with those pros early. And a lot of the technology that we have now was really informed by what the pros are doing, what they were trying to cobble together on their own as the science and the application started to kind of show itself in and out of the training room. and it started to kind of really this trickle down effect. And it's super cool to see something that LeBron James would, covet and use and not talk about, and use for years before people knew that he was in, for example, the NormaTec boots or the Hypervolt. And now it's just like, yeah, sure, I'll grab it for Christmas. Like, it's, no big thing.
Right. It's Weekend Warrior can throw them on and watch Seinfeld.
That's it.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been such a great conversation. I truly hope it helps people. And I'm not pitching NormaTec. I'm just serious. Like, I love the stuff you guys make. It's made a huge difference, in whatever like athletic pursuits I have. But to your point, and just like generally feeling better, moving better. And that's true for my whole family. So, closing thought here, if people want to learn more either about you personally or the company, like where can I point them? Where's a great place to start? Obviously the HyperIce website. But
yeah, HyperIce website, Googling HyperIce and NormaTec and just reading some of the stuff that's out there. Touching base with some of our customer service people. We love talking about what we do and why we do it. And obviously, Instagram and Twitter and all those good sources of information. But just kind of, again, going back and saying, what are the pros using? They can use anything in the world. Why do they keep coming back to the stuff? It's because it works. It's not a fad. It's one of those things where, remember the Eagles were in the playoffs and they're like, oh, pickle juice, right? Or something, right? There's always these things that come out. Maybe pickle juice is the best thing and we just haven't zeroed in on it. But the fact that this has been around for a decade and only becoming more and more instrumental and infused into our daily routine, I think is something that I'm excited to see kind of where this goes for sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. Thank you for making the time. We appreciate it. And maybe at some point in the future, we can have you back on. Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it, man. All right. Thanks a lot.